All right, let's get into this conversation now. The ANC maintaining that the formation of the Government of National Unity is on track, despite a dispute with the Democratic Alliance over cabinet posts. A leaked letter from the DA's Federal Council chairperson, Helen Zille, showing that the party wants 11 cabinet posts. Well, you might say 11, some are saying 12. Nomvula Mokonyane is the ANC's first Deputy Secretary General. She is going to answer that question. The ANC yesterday, by the way, slamming some GNU members for what it said were outrageous demands. So let's get those details now as to where negotiations are. And Ms. Mokonyane joins us in studio this evening. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. The country is hungry for news on this GNU. What can you tell us about these GNU talks?
Thank you very much once more for inviting us on behalf of the ANC. The ANC received the outcome of the results, and out of it made a call that we will be inviting various, all political parties to form a government of national unity, having looked at various options. Where are we now? We have 10 parties that are represented in Parliament, having signed the statement of intent. We also have a process that is in line with the statement of intent, where the President is in contact with leaders of the different political parties on the way forward. And finally, it will be the prerogative of the President, as it is outlined also in the very statement of intent, as to what needs to happen, the prerogative of the President, the respect of the Constitution, including the selection of cabinet ministers.
The Democratic Alliance says it wants 11 or 12 cabinet posts. You'll confirm as to how many the exact number is, but failure to deliver on that, the GNU deal is off. Fair demand?
There is no GNU between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. We called all political parties. They themselves responded to that. They've put their proposals and they leaked that to the media when there are processes of negotiations that have been taking place, as well as consultation between the various leaders of political parties. What the Democratic Alliance has done is, again, a misstep, including a misunderstanding of what we seek to achieve, that it is not an exclusive arrangement of the DA together with the African National Congress. Because if you look at Rule 23 of the very statement of intent, it actually speaks about inclusivity that must accommodate all parties that are represented in Parliament, and not those that have got bigger numbers, because every vote counts. And the fact that people have got a seat in Parliament, we need to appreciate that they themselves have to be accommodated. And anyone who then seeks to take a responsibility that is not within the spirit of the statement of intent, again, is actually acting in bad faith, including what has happened with the leak of the letter, as well as not going back to the negotiations, as I've come here from, again, continuous engagements with all other parties that some of them were meeting for the fourth time, because we'll never tire in engaging anyone. Nobody can give us an ultimatum, because it is not about any individual party. It is not even about the ANC. It is about the future of this country and the respect of everybody who's represented in Parliament through all other political parties that are represented there.
The back and forth that we have seen publicly now, at least in the public's eyes, starting with Fikile Mbalula, Helen Zille, and again Helen Zille. This back and forth, has it only been with the DA?
There's been a back and forth with many, including those that are as yet to make a public announcement as to whether they are in or they are not in. There are parties that we have met 4 times. There are parties that we have interacted with 3 times. There are parties that still want to meet us even today. And they've been much decent, because they've never gone public and they've never made it a dramatic kind of a stance where there is no agreement. What is of importance also, Xoli, is that we're doing something that is not necessarily a wish by any party, because when you contest elections, you contest to win. But here we are now. We need to actually work within the spirit of appreciating the decision made, by the choice made by South Africans. And where we are today, looking at international best practice of putting together a coalition governments or governments of national unity, not a single country globally has been able to put a government of national unity or a coalition within a week. And I dare say we are almost at the doorstep.
Okay, well, that's promising, almost at the doorstep. That's a headline in my standards.
We are.
So, let's conclude with the Democratic Alliance. Have you settled on their demand? We saw that letter, and it lists a number of portfolios. Where are you in relation to that?
No self-respecting organization can actually settle on what the DA is putting, because it is like they are imposing what they believe is good for them. They must actually appreciate that we all serve at the behest of the president in line with the Constitution. Secondly, that there are parties that also have to be accommodated, because in line with Rule 23 of the SOI, the Statement of Intent, our intention is to appreciate and embrace everybody. And therefore, we are not responding to the demands of the Democratic Alliance. In negotiations, it's a give and take. And the ultimatum that they have put is again an act that shows that their intention is not to be inclusive, but an assumption that it is a coalition of the DA and the African National Congress, and maybe one other party, because they signed earlier. The fact of the matter is that they signed on the same day with the Patriotic Alliance, if they care to know, and if South Africans have to be told. We have many other parties that signed. All other parties have come, and nobody would be left behind, because again, as I've said, to bring everybody together, you need to be tolerant, you need to be accommodative, and of importance, you need to also respect the spirit of the South African Constitution in terms of the role of the president and his prerogative or her prerogative for the future.
If the Democratic Alliance's demands are not met, is the ANC willing to walk away from this agreement, at least with the Democratic Alliance? But before you answer that question, I need to take a break. You'll answer immediately after. Let's take a break. You're watching News at Prime, and if you're just joining us, we are in conversation with the ANC's first Deputy Secretary General, Nomvula Mokonyane, and it's all got to do with the GNU talks. Ms. Mokonyane, thank you for staying. There are those who've lampooned you publicly as a party to say it seemed that you did not read key clauses of this agreement with the Democratic Alliance in particular, and therefore you may not have familiarized yourself with what they would ultimately demand. Is the ANC willing to walk away from this agreement with the Democratic Alliance if the positions remain intransigent?
It is up to the Democratic Alliance to make a determination. We have read it properly. We also are inviting them and the public to also read that clause about the 60%. It's proportional to those that are in parliament and not what the Democratic Alliance seeks to interpret. Secondly, we emphasize that processes of government are defined by the Constitution and are legislated, and it is up to them if they do not want to reflect on that. So for anyone to assume that it is us who have not read properly, it is because there's been selective reference, including wrong interpretation, in a narrow and self-fulfilling gesture by the Democratic Alliance. All other parties understand. So it can't just be about the Democratic Alliance. And unfortunately, we now have the letter that has gone out public and them moving away from the negotiating table and issuing these kind of statements when we could have actually been sitting together like everybody else and make each other to understand. If they believe they are not satisfied with what is on the table, it is up to them. We invited them. If they do not want to become part of this memorable occasion that the ANC is spearheading, let South Africans see them for who they are.
Is it true, the suggestion that that letter that's been leaked publicly has subsequently been withdrawn? Is that true?
I'm not a member of the DA. I'm sure you know where to find them. It is now a public document. With it being withdrawn or not withdrawn, it's actually an unfortunate thing that they've done. But what is important for us is that we will not concede to things that actually are beyond what the Constitution dictates and what is in the spirit of a government of national unity. It's not about the Democratic Alliance. We can still form a government of national unity with or without the DA.
But how easy or difficult would that be? I mean, that will take stitching up of a whole range of parties. In fact, speaking about a whole range of parties, you had a conversation today with Action SA. What was that about?
Our meeting went very well. They also expressed the support of a government of national unity and them actually playing a very constructive and effective opposition, which is also quite important in the spirit of a government of national unity. And that is the approach that both ourselves and Action SA have supported, which again shows that for them it's not about occupying a cabinet post, like some are now talking about, give us this post. They are saying, we want to be part of this journey of bringing South Africans and knitting everybody together, but our preference is to be an effective partner in the government of national unity, being on the opposition side. We graciously accepted that.
What does that mean? I'd like for us to interrogate that a little bit. When they say they want to play constructive opposition in Parliament, I think I read into their statement that in some instances where there are areas of convergence, Action SA would be willing to vote with the ANC and its GNU partners. And of course, where they have to be firm and say this is nonsense, they're willing to say that as well. Am I understanding it correctly?
One of the things that you need to go and look at, it's the manifesto of Action SA. On the area of health, for example, they almost are at the same space where the African National Congress is, just to cite an example, where they also are emphasizing is that, yes, there will be instances where we will be critical of government, where we would actually put alternatives compared to what government is bringing, but will not disrupt government, will not actually undermine the House, and thirdly, will not be an opposition that will refuse to interact with yourselves. And remember where Action SA comes from. And for us to be together in the space where they say we want to be an effective, constructive opposition, and let's look at our role in ensuring that this government of national unity will be held accountable. I think it's a great move for South Africa.
I want to move from this point. If the DA does pull out, how many political parties realistically would you need to stitch together in order to form a government of national unity?
We are able to move on with everybody, including the DA, but we're also able to move with all those that are signatories, the 10, out of the 10, the 9, and be able to do the business and appoint cabinet, because President doesn't actually need to have a 50+1 to appoint members of parliament to become members of the cabinet. And therefore the ANC is in a well-positioned position to can move on, and we are ready. We just hope that the Democratic Alliance will appreciate the mandate that it has been given. And for us, through the work that the President is doing with the leaders of various political parties, including the leader of the DA, Mr. Steenhuisen, we'll be able to find one another. But we're not trapped in the relationship.
You may not be trapped at national, but you will be compromised in Gauteng.
We may not be trapped. We are even ready. Remember we said, we're even ready to sit in the opposition benches. We're even ready to form a minority government. We are ready for anything that will take South Africa forward. We can't be delayed and we can't be blackmailed by those who have the appetite of creating confusion and sowing unnecessary divisions and anxieties in this country. These processes are going fairly well. And what is interesting, some of those who had told us a week ago that they no longer want to hear anything from us, they are now calling us now as I'm coming here to say, can we meet? Precisely because of the character of the ANC, we're still ready to meet with them as well.
We have to talk uncomfortable matters at times, and this is one of those moments. Yes, the Democratic Alliance may be a GNU partner, but how easy or difficult is it to deal with a party that harbors alleged racist bigots within it? How difficult is it going to be for you publicly to sell this GNU to someone who says, I can't stomach the DA, particularly for the people that it has within its ranks?
When you look at the country and the parties that are in existence here in South Africa, there's a history that goes with many of those parties, and yet we're able to sit around the negotiating table and negotiate the future of this country. And that is one of the things that South Africa must actually appreciate. We have stability here in Gauteng, in KwaZulu-Natal, when the IFP and the ANC were at loggerheads and there were killings in Kumalo Road, there were killings in Swaneville, in Kagiso, but we're able to embrace one another in the spirit of nation building. And even with this one, we have condemned it, we abhor racism, and it is upon the very party to act in a manner that shows that it is not in their name.
Did you discuss it?
It has been raised, and that's why you have seen the DA actually taking the kind of position that they have taken. Any issue, nothing that can affect a government of national unity is not discussed.
Well, talking about uncomfortable matters, Zizigota was sworn in Parliament today as a member of Parliament. This is after he was charged. Remember, he was charged even before the parliamentary process. He voluntarily stepped away from his ministerial position. He stepped away from ANC, NEC activities. Was he under the ANC instructions to go and be sworn in today?
Honestly speaking, I've come to hear of this process. We've been in negotiations. And of course, Comrade Zizi had taken a decision to step aside from any public office and in representing the ANC. The implications of him being sworn in may not necessarily mean that he will be a member of Parliament, precisely because the lists are not being changed now, and he may not actually be appointed or assigned any duty by the ANC and by Parliament. If the ANC has to forfeit one vote in Parliament because of this, it is again what is good for the movement and good for the people of South Africa to see us being consistent, that if you step aside, you step aside. Remember, he has not been found guilty. So he's stepping aside from executing the responsibilities. So he will be in the role of members of Parliament without actually assuming any responsibility.
Is it drawing a salary, though?
I'm not sure about those issues.
You've been a member of Parliament for a long time.
I've been a member of Parliament. I've never stepped aside, and I think it is these kind of things that we definitely have to look at. I know that there are other members of Parliament like Bongani Bongo who also stepped aside, and every time when there was supposed to be a vote or whatever, the ANC will call him. And we know also of Comrade Zandile in KwaZulu-Natal. So I really hope that both the Integrity Committee and all other relevant bodies of the ANC will advise the WIPARI and the ANC accordingly on Comrade Sis.
Ms. Mokonyane, you are an office bearer within the ANC. The step-aside rule is there for South Africans to read. They've seen some people stepping aside and indeed forfeiting even salaries. this particular step today, does it not make a mockery of the ANC's step-aside rule? Does it not make a mockery of the ANC's commitment to walk away from its image of corruption?
I really hope that it will be again in Comrade Zize's conscience that he will write a letter to the legislature, to Parliament, and indicate that I have been sworn in because I was in the list that was already submitted to the IEC, and therefore, on the basis of me having been charged, I now submit my letter of stepping aside as a member of Parliament. That will be good for the ANC, that will be good for him, that will be good for the country.
Final question. The president has been keeping the country on tenterhooks. When is the announcement?
I assume your organization here, you would have done a lot of research. International best practice. Other countries have taken almost 1 month, five days to put together a government, a coalition government. Others have gone to 524 days. How many days are we now in? It's something that we have never had. It's not the same as the Government of National Unity of 1994. It's a Government of National Unity that was not expected. Everybody assumed that we'll have a majority and have everybody. But I'm saying we're almost there. South Africans must believe in this particular process. And the reason why we have not gone out to tell the nation about the dynamics there, it's precisely because we do not want to scare and make people uncomfortable. Unfortunate, others opted to do that. We're at the doorstep.
All right. Well, on that very pregnant pause, we are at the doorstep of this announcement. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Tony.